It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Back. Thanks so much for being with us today. Hey, here joining us live in studio, we got State Representative Dan Sullivan. Dan, welcome back, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody. Great to be here.
Yes. Sorry, I had you muted there for a second. Okay, so Dan, let's just talk a little bit about. I mean, I know you are running for re-election, so first of all, congratulations on that.
Thank you. I'm excited about it. Out there knocking doors. I met some great people. I met Command Sergeant Major James Cameron, who is a big fan of the show.
Oh, wow.
And the Commander, Sergeant Major, works with veterans helping veterans. And I hope he's listening again, and just want to plug that organization, all the great work they do in our community, helping our injured vets and other vets. And I think he'd be a great interview. He was a little hesitant to come on, but I think if you prodded him, he may come on and join
I would
me.
love that. I always love to, get interviews with our military veterans.
Yeah, well, I've been
really, because they're so much braver than I am. You know what I mean? I can't get over that.
Well, you face your own enemy, I think.
Yeah.
Again, I've been out knocking doors and visiting with people and sharing my voting record with them. My slogan, if you see my signs that are out there, says, "From God to us, life and liberty."
Mm-hmm.
And I chose that slogan because it has a lot of meaning to me. And first of all, the life side of that, that's part of our founding fathers. That, by the way, that statement came from Thomas Jefferson. He's the one that made that. And the life side of this, my voting record on life has been one of the strongest in the legislature. For many of those groups that are down there in the Family Council, there were only 8 of 100 had a better voting record than I for them.
Yep.
Americans for Prosperity and only I think 8 had a higher voting record than I. The Arkansas Project, Dan Greenberg's.
Yeah, what do they call that? The AAI scorecard or something.
Yeah, they have a one, and I was one of the, I think, 8th or 9th on theirs also.
Yeah.
Number 1 with Conduit.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a very strong conservative voting record. A little bit surprised I have a Republican as an opponent, but we'll get back to that later.
Yeah.
But a strong voting record on the life issue. Our legislature has worked together to have one of the strongest pro-life stances and laws in the nation. We even passed legislation that would be challenged to force the challenge so that we could set the standard for what right to life legislation looks like. The same thing for religious freedom. Although I think we had an opportunity to maybe to make it a little stronger, we still have one of the best religious freedom bills in the nation. So my record on religious freedom is really strong, and I've worked together with others to do that.
Yeah.
Also, from God to us, life and liberty. The liberty side, I think, is where I've run a few people, angered them or upset them on my liberty side. I brought a statement here. I think this was a Benjamin Franklin statement. It says, "I predict the future happy of Americans if they can prevent the government from wasting the labors of the people under the pretense of taking care of them."
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And, that's happened big time in healthcare. And I heard the show earlier, you talking about education. And I know our teachers deserve more money and more pay, and public education is a critical part. It's part of our Constitution. I'm a constitutional conservative. Strong pro-education. And I know our teachers get upset that we don't have enough money into education, but our money's being funneled into healthcare. You've gone through and listed how many tens and hundreds of millions of dollars are going to healthcare. You've talked about bringing in companies from China into my district, District 53 in northeast corner of Craighead County. We're bringing in a Chinese company and giving them tax breaks. That's money that should be going into education. And unfortunately, I don't hear the teachers speaking up against those kinds of things that take money out of education. And I think it's just, I hope to educate our teachers about that because I think all of us support education.
Yeah. Well, yeah, to say that you don't support education, that is kind of a leftist tactic. That if you're for like new ideas or maybe different ideas, that you automatically, it seems you can get painted with this concept that you must you must not like education. And I think that assumes that the way we're doing things now is the best that it can be.
Yeah, and matter of fact, I'm on the Career Education Committee, and we sit around with business people around the table and talk about ideas and what we can do. We had the director of career education for Arkansas and higher education we're talking, and we're talking about all these different things we need to do to help fund career education. And I've already talked to the folks from Nucor Steel, a great group of folks who donate lots of money, just freely donate it. And I'd talk with them and said, look, guys, if we gave you a tax break, would you be willing to invest a part of that in career education? They said, absolutely. It's exactly what Trump did. Trump went to the companies over in Europe and said, hey, guys, will you bring your money back and will you bring the jobs back if we give you a tax break? And the left said, oh, terrible idea. It'll never happen. It'll never happen. Well, guess what? Overwhelming success. So I proposed and raised my hand, asked a question, and said, look, Director, don't you think we need to give our business a tax break because the people sitting around this table would gladly donate to that. It's their jobs. It makes their job easier if we would reduce their taxes. And of course, all the business people are going, yeah, we'll work on that. And I said, ask the director, and the director said, well, that's for a different task force. And I think you were talking about that task force today.
Yeah, we love our tax forces.
Yeah,
we love
that's the tax task force.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard that even discussed as an idea to fund career education.
You have a lot of great ideas concerning saving taxpayer money. I mean, I know you certainly. We've talked about it before, and I know you've talked about it with your colleagues. And a lot of times, when you start looking at efficiencies, and it means less taxpayer money going to this or that, it makes people who kind of survive and get their livelihoods off of a big government a little nervous. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we've heard this term being talked about, the economic elites taking over government. That's exactly what's going on in District 53 in my race. My opponent, Cole Peck, is a doctor, and the people that are funding him are essentially the economic elites of Northeast Arkansas and Jonesboro.
Now, so there's a lot of healthcare interests there, and you ran a bill that would have really brought Arkansas in line with nurse practitioners in other states in scope of practice, right? And that's what this is really about,
right?
As
a matter of fact, Nucor tried to open up a clinic to take care of all of their employees and their families for free. Now, think about that. All their families for free. They have them all over the United States.
Nucor is outside of Arkansas. Nucor plants do this already.
Do this all over the United States, yes. And they were not allowed to open one in the state of Arkansas. The medical board stopped it. Of course, also, we ran telehealth legislation that would have allowed people to pick up their phone and call their doctor. And the medical society killed that. Now, we did the next session, they opened it up a little bit, but they killed that because they want that money for the office visit. And if you can pick it up and talk to your doctor over the phone, I think it was a $40 call. And many businesses whose employees use that waive the copay because it's so much cheaper than going into the doctor's office. But our medical society killed that. Now, I'm not trying to get on our doctors because I love our doctors and appreciate them. It's the corporate medical side of this. That's where the money goes.
Yes.
And they are very protective.
Well, it's kind of like education in a way. It's like it's not it's not the teachers. There's a separation between the administration and education and the teachers, and these administrators who are at the top of these healthcare conglomerates. They look at smaller government and they equate it as, well, that's going to be less money to hospitals or something like that.
Well, it would be, and we're talking about tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in savings for these. Do you know that
for the government?
For the government, well, for the taxpayer.
For the taxpayer, that's what I meant to say. Sorry.
And the telehealth and the advanced practice nurses were both in the Stevens report, but they never came up. Of course, I wasn't on the committee, and when I'd ask about them, I couldn't. We never could have a viable discussion. But that was killed by the people that are supporting my opponent. That's where that comes from. And of course, the biggest one, I've ran the bill to limit Medicaid expansion. Let's stop that.
Yeah.
And, I know you were a part of a conversation I had with some other people. The government, the state has claimed they cut 73,000 people off of Medicaid, but we still have about 285 on there. So their claim, it's kind of like the tax claim. We're cutting your taxes over here, but we're raising your taxes over here, and the net is different from what the savings are claimed to be. And the same is true when we try to reduce the numbers. We may have reduced 73,000, but we actually added another 25 or 30,000.
Yeah.
So the net cost doesn't go down. I hate to get down in the weeds on this stuff, but I know your listeners are pretty educated on these kind of things.
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, they surely are. But I just wanted to. I'm glad you brought up your opposition to Arkansas Works in terms of that, but let's talk about that specifically, because what we're hearing is like, well, you people who are anti-Obamacare, you don't have a plan, but that's not true. Actually, right. There are viable plans out there. Talk about what the plan is.
Well, had we been able to cap that number, that would have been a good start. We could have and Paul, I think everybody can relate to this. If you were going to buy a large product, maybe you're going to buy a home, maybe you're going to buy a car, maybe you're just going to buy a pair of shoes. You go out and comparative shop and you say, show me what that price looks like. What do I get? What are my benefits? What all the issues are. And you look at that contract and read through it. Again, whatever you're purchasing, people do that. I sat down in Lake City one day and they had with their city council, they argued for probably, I shouldn't say argued, they had a lively discussion over $50 on a new garbage truck. I sat down in the Brooklyn City Council and they're talking about running new water lines and what those costs are. The whole task force the goal of the task force was to see how we could keep Arkansas Works going, not how to look at a separate plan and what options there were to cut the taxes. And the whole purpose I won't speak for Representative Miller, for Josh, but for me, the purpose of that no vote, or one of the purposes, was to force our legislature into having an open debate so that people could have a side-by-side comparison. What does it look like if we go through with Arkansas Works? What does it look like if we go to a 90-10 match, which many states do?
Yeah, traditional Medicaid.
Medicaid, go down to 90-10. What does that look like? And you heard it, the comment that was made, well, this ship has already sailed. But we don't need to see comparatively what that looks like. We actually asked for that comparison several months before the vote came up. And I think it was maybe a week or 2 weeks before we got a little one-pager. So here we've got a $1.7 billion program in Arkansas Works. And we're just asking for a comparative list, a valid discussion, a viable discussion.
They don't want to have the discussion.
Where we have those numbers and we can debate that. That's what Senator King wanted to do.
Yeah.
But that bill got voted down and there was very little discussion, maybe 20 minutes.
Yeah. The numbers are it's certainly controlled in terms of, when they come out and things like that. And it makes it really frustrating. There's just not the political will to have the debate. But, I think it's clear that, you've got a record, Dan Sullivan, that stands for limited government. It's not just the, like you said earlier, it's not just the Conduit for Commerce scorecard that you did so well, and you did so well on so many of them. You've got one of the most conservative voting records in the entire state, and that sometimes will make the bigger government sorts. Well, let me say this. Every time you make a conservative vote and maybe somebody else makes a liberal vote, you look like a conservative and they look like a liberal.
Well, Paul, this again, some of these are quotes from other people, or my paraphrase of quotes, but one of them is, anytime power and wealth are centralized, they become a threat to freedom. That's what's happening at our state level. We're centralizing the wealth, we're centralizing the power, and the same thing is happening in District 53. The centralized wealth, the centralized power. The people that are, and one of the things they did in picking my opponent, they just kind of picked a blank sheet. My opponent has no record on anything. We can't find any record.
I'd love for him to come on the program. You know,
And maybe we're having a debate April 21st.
Really? Okay.
In Lake City, Arkansas, at the First Baptist Church, 3 p.m. on a Saturday. Mr. Peck and I are debating, and I hope you can be there. I hope we can get a lot of folks to turn out, and maybe I'll ask him publicly at that time when he can join the show, and we'll see if he can do that.
You know, he's welcome to come on. I don't have his number, but I have reached out to his office, you know, before. I'd like to know, you know, what he thinks on just all of the issues that are traditional, you know, the platform.
I've had several people tell me they've posted on his Facebook page and asked him some questions. Why are you running against Representative Sullivan? He's got a great conservative record. What is it in his record that you're going to change? They tell me that those posts are hidden, or those posts are not responded to publicly, or he will call them and just ask if he can discuss it privately. But if you have listeners that like to ask that question, I'm sure we'd like to. Again, how are you going to beat Dan Sullivan? What does it take? You're going to have somebody, because they can't challenge me on my record on life. My record on life is as solid and strong as anybody's in the House. You're going to have to do it on the liberty side, and you're going to have to do it very quietly, because my record as a conservative is strong.
Yeah, and they're not going to,
liberty.
Yeah, and they're not going to come out and say, well, you know, he's trying to save taxpayer money. Yeah. We got to stop him from saving taxpayer money. It'll be something else, you know.
Yes, it is, and it's going to be over the taxes, and it's over health care. You know, my opponent is a special interest candidate. You can look at who donates to him. It's all the medical conglomerate and the medical monopoly. And folks, remember, this PBM, part of the problem with the PBMs, if you'll remember, was Arkansas Works.
Yeah, it created the problem.
It was the money going there to the insurance companies that created the problem for our local pharmacies. You know, when you look at the property rights issue, and you've talked about the hog farm and the impact of big government on the hog farm and on our local farmers, our local farmers are upset about that just because of the infringement on property rights. Our advanced practice nurses who have gone to school, highly qualified, you know, their intellectual knowledge is a property right that they're being stifled on, and they cannot use, are allowed to compete in the free market. And our medical, the big medical there's a lot of money in that, and they are ready to stop any challenge to their monopoly on those systems.
Yeah. I really, we're out of time, State Representative Dan Sullivan, but I really like your slogan, from God to us, life and liberty, because it does really encompass, you know, the liberty aspect. We can talk forever about, you know, more freedom, and then the life aspect, you know, without life and the sanctity of it, you can't have liberty at all. I mean, there's not even a debate for that.
Plug one more thing real quick.
Absolutely.
We have a dyslexia awareness golf tournament at Sage Meadows on April 28th. This is the third year my wife and I have sponsored that. We raise money for kids with dyslexia. 100% of the money goes to that program. And you can contact me.
And what's the date on that again?
That's April the 28th.
Okay. All right, April the 28th. State Representative Dan Sullivan.
Thank you, Paul. Good to be here.
Appreciate it. Folks, we're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment.